The champagne flute felt slippery in my palm as I watched my wife perform for her audience. Ivy stood at the center of our table at the company gala, her voice carrying just far enough to ensure maximum humiliation. "Oh, you followed me again? I'd have more fun if I came alone." Her laugh tinkled like breaking glass, and the faces around our table lit up with that particular brand of cruel amusement people get when witnessing someone else's misery. "I'm Evan Hollis, and I run a boutique security tech consultancy. I know how to read a room, how to spot the weak points in any system, and how to exploit them. Right now, I was studying the system that had once been my marriage, noting every crack and flaw." Monica, Ivy's best friend from the PR department, practically glowed with secondhand satisfaction. "Ivy, you're terrible," she giggled, but her eyes were already calculating how she'd retell this story tomorrow. Eli from accounting leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Evan, maybe you should let her have some space, man. You know what they say about clingy husbands." The table erupted in knowing chuckles. I felt the familiar sting of public embarrassment, the kind that makes your chest tight and your face hot. But instead of the usual shame, something else was crystallizing in my mind, something cold and methodical. I set down my champagne and stood slowly. The conversation quieted as they waited for my reaction, probably expecting me to slink away or make some pathetic attempt at defending myself. "You know what, Ivy?" I said, my voice steady and calm. "You're absolutely right. I'll do exactly what you want." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raised slightly. She hadn't expected agreement. "I'll make sure you get everything you deserve," I continued, meeting her gaze directly. "Every single thing." Then I turned and walked away, leaving behind the nervous laughter and whispered speculation. I could feel their eyes following me across the ballroom, through the lobby, and out into the cool Boston evening. The valet brought my car around, a modest sedan compared to Ivy's flashy convertible. As I drove home through the suburban streets lined with smart homes and manicured lawns, I began planning. My phone buzzed with texts from Ivy, probably wondering where I'd gone, but I ignored them. I pulled into our driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house we'd bought together 5 years ago. The motion sensors triggered the porch lights, and I could see Mrs. Pendergast's curtains twitching in the house next door. Our elderly neighbor never missed anything that happened on Maple Street. Inside, I went straight to my home office and opened my laptop. My fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, accessing accounts, checking security protocols, reviewing digital footprints. If Ivy wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong opponent. My phone rang. Casey, my old army buddy who now worked as a private investigator. "Evan, you sound different," he said after I answered. "What's going on?" "I need a favor, Case. Actually, I need several favors." "This about Ivy?" "She wants more fun. I'm going to make sure she gets exactly that." Casey was quiet for a moment. "You sure about this, man? Sometimes it's better to just walk away." Walking away is what she expects. What everyone expects. I pulled up Ivy's social media profiles on my screen. But I'm not everyone. After I hung up with Casey, I spent the next hour implementing the first phase of my plan. By the time Ivy stumbled home at 2 a.m, reeking of expensive perfume and wine, I was already 3 steps ahead. She found me in the kitchen, making coffee. "Where did you go tonight?" she demanded, her words slightly slurred. "You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues." I looked up from my mug, studying her face. Even disheveled and tipsy, Ivy was stunning, the kind of woman who turned heads and expected the world to rearrange itself for her convenience. "I went home," I said simply. "Just like you wanted." "Don't be dramatic, Evan. You know I didn't mean—" "Actually, I think you meant exactly what you said." I took a sip of coffee. "And I'm going to help you get what you want." She stared at me, confusion flickering across her features. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You'll find out." The next morning, Ivy discovered the first surprise. Her car wouldn't start, not because I'd sabotaged it, but because I'd had it legally repossessed. As the cosigner on the loan, I had every right to reclaim the vehicle when payments became delinquent. And thanks to a few strategic account transfers, those payments had indeed become delinquent. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I watched from the kitchen window as she stood in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing frantically at the empty space where her convertible used to be. Mrs. Pendergast was watching too, probably taking mental notes for her next neighborhood gossip session. My phone buzzed with an angry text from Ivy. "What did you do with my car?" I typed back, "Helping you have more fun, just like you wanted." The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I wasn't breaking any laws or doing anything overtly malicious. I was simply using my knowledge of our shared financial systems, my understanding of human psychology, and my professional expertise in security vulnerabilities to give Ivy exactly what she'd asked for: complete independence from me. Ivy's retaliation came swiftly and predictably. By Tuesday morning, I was fielding concerned calls from potential clients who'd heard disturbing rumors about my stability and professionalism. She'd clearly spent the weekend working her network, painting me as a controlling, obsessive husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. "Evan Hollis Security Solutions. This is Evan," I answered when my biggest client called. "Evan, it's Robert Chen from Meridian Tech. Listen, I've been hearing some concerning things about your personal situation. Maybe we should postpone the contract renewal meeting until things settle down." After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and actually smiled. Ivy was playing exactly the game I'd expected, using her position and connections to damage my reputation while positioning herself as the victim. She had the acting range of a ham sandwich, but people were eating it up anyway. Time for phase 2, I called Casey. "I need you to do some digging: social media posts, security camera footage from the office building, phone records if you can manage it legally." "What am I looking for?" "Evidence of what Ivy's really been up to, and I want to know everything about Damian Cross." Damian was Ivy's boss, the CTO of her tech company. Tall, handsome in a generic way, with the kind of smug confidence that came from never facing real consequences. I'd met him at company events and immediately disliked his habit of standing too close to other men's wives. Casey called back that afternoon with interesting news. "Your instincts were right about Cross. He's got a reputation as a player, and I've got some interesting security footage from the parking garage at Ivy's building. Want to guess whose car she's been getting into after work?" "How often?" 3 times last week alone. "And Evan, I pulled some social media data. Monica's been posting some pretty revealing stuff on her private Instagram. Looks like she's got her own thing going with Cross, too." I felt that cold satisfaction spreading through my chest again. The pieces were falling into place beautifully. "Keep digging. I want everything: emails, text messages, financial records, whatever you can get legally. And if I can't get it legally, then we'll find another way. I'm not asking you to break any laws, Case. I'm just asking you to be creative." That evening, I had dinner with Lucas and Mia, my kids from my first marriage. They lived with their mother most of the time, but we had our regular Tuesday dinners at the diner downtown. Lucas was 12 and sharp as a tack, while Mia was 10 and had inherited my talent for reading people. "Dad, you seem different," Mia observed over her chocolate milkshake. "Are you and Ivy fighting?" "Sometimes adults have disagreements, sweetheart, but that's not your problem to worry about." "Is she going to move out?" Lucas asked. "Because honestly, she's kind of mean to us when you're not around." That stopped me cold. "What do you mean?" "She just makes comments about how we're not really part of her family, how we're just your baggage from before." Lucas shrugged, trying to act like it didn't bother him, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. Another piece of evidence for my growing file. Ivy wasn't just betraying me, she was hurting my children. After I dropped the kids off, I drove to Rita's Bar and Grill, the local establishment where half the neighborhood came to drink and gossip. Rita herself was behind the bar, a woman in her 50s who'd seen every kind of human drama play out in her establishment. "Evening, Evan. You look like a man with something on his mind." "Just thinking about how people show their true colors when they think nobody's watching." Rita poured me a whiskey without being asked. "Speaking of true colors, your wife was in here Sunday night, with that fancy fellow from her work." "Damian Cross?" "That's the one. They were pretty cozy in the back booth. Monica was with them too, though she looked like she was trying not to be a third wheel." Rita leaned across the bar conspiratorially. "Word of advice? When a woman starts bringing her boyfriend to the neighborhood bar, she's not trying to keep it secret anymore." I sipped my whiskey and absorbed this information. Ivy was getting sloppy, confident in her ability to manipulate the situation. That overconfidence would be her downfall. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop harassing your wife, or you'll regret it. D." I showed the message to Rita, who snorted with laughter. "Boy thinks he's tough, sending threatening texts. You want my advice? Men like that are all bluster until someone stands up to them." I finished my drink and headed home, where I found Ivy waiting in the living room, arms crossed and fury radiating from every pore. "You had my car repossessed? Are you out of your mind? I exercised my legal rights as a co-signer when the payments became delinquent. If you'd like to discuss our financial arrangements, I'm happy to do that." Our financial arrangements? Evan, I make more money than you do. Then paying for your own car shouldn't be a problem. I sat down across from her, noting how her designer outfit probably cost more than most people made in a week. Unless you've been spending your money on other things. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what you think it means, Ivy. I'm not as stupid as you seem to believe. She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. I don't have to listen to this. I'm staying at Monica's tonight. Give Damien my regards, I called after her as she stormed out. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows, and I heard Mrs. Pendergast's porch light click on next door. Our elderly neighbor would have quite a story to share at the next community association meeting. I pulled out my laptop and began documenting everything, the threatening text from Damien, Ivy's admission that she was staying elsewhere, the timeline of her recent behavior. Every detail would be useful later. My phone rang. Casey again. I've got some interesting financial data. Looks like your wife's been making some unusual purchases lately. High-end lingerie, expensive dinners at restaurants you've never been to, hotel rooms downtown. All on our joint credit cards? Every single one. She's not even trying to hide it. Perfect. Keep tracking everything. And Casey, I want you to start following Cross. I have a feeling he's about to make some very poor decisions. As I hung up, I realized I was actually enjoying myself for the first time in months. Ivy had wanted to play games, to humiliate me publicly while conducting her affair in private. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated exactly who she was playing against. Wednesday morning brought fresh developments. I was reviewing security protocols for a new client when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Hollis, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. I understand you're involved in a rather public dispute with your wife regarding some financial irregularities at her company. I sat up straight. I'm sorry, what? We received an anonymous tip about some concerning activities at Ivy Hollis's workplace. Allegations of inappropriate relationships affecting business decisions, misuse of company resources, that sort of thing. Would you care to comment? I think you have the wrong person, Ms. Walsh. I haven't spoken to any reporters. But as I hung up, I was already putting the pieces together. Someone else was playing this game, and they were playing it harder than I was. My phone buzzed with a frantic text from Ivy. What did you tell the reporters? I called Casey immediately. Did you leak anything to the press? Not me, man. But I've got some interesting news. Seems like Damien Cross has made some enemies at his company. Word is, there's been some questionable decision-making lately. Contracts going to companies where he has personal connections, that sort of thing. Personal connections. Companies owned by friends, family members, people he's romantically involved with. The board's been asking questions. I felt that familiar cold satisfaction spreading through my chest. Ivy and Damien's affair wasn't just personal. It was professional misconduct that could bring down both their careers. Keep digging, and Casey, I want to know everything about Monica, too. Something tells me she's not as loyal to Ivy as she pretends to be. That afternoon, I had lunch with Detective Sibley, a local cop I'd worked with on some security consulting projects. We met at a diner downtown, away from the suburban gossip network. Evan, I've been hearing some interesting stories about domestic drama in your neighborhood. Want to tell me what's really going on? My wife's having an affair with her boss. She's been using our joint accounts to fund it, and now she's trying to destroy my business reputation to cover her tracks. Sibley stirred sugar into his coffee thoughtfully. That's a pretty serious accusation. You got evidence? I slid a folder across the table. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, security camera footage from her office building. All perfectly legal to obtain since they're from our joint accounts and public spaces. He flipped through the documents, whistling softly. This is pretty damning stuff. But what do you want me to do about it? Adultery isn't a crime, and financial disputes between spouses are civil matters. I don't want you to do anything. I just want someone in law enforcement to be aware of the situation in case things escalate. You planning on escalating things, Evan? I met his gaze steadily. I'm planning on protecting myself and my children. If that means exposing the truth about what Ivy and Damien have been doing, then so be it. That evening, I drove to the gym where Damien worked out. I'd done my homework. The man was predictable in his routines, always showing up at 6:30 for his workout, always using the same equipment, always surrounded by the same group of admirers who hung on his every word about disrupting industries and leveraging synergies. I arrived early and positioned myself at a machine with a clear view of the entrance. When Damien walked in, I watched him work the room, fist-bumping other members, flirting with the female trainers, generally acting like he owned the place. I waited until he was between sets on the bench press, his usual audience gathered around him, before making my move. Damien Cross, right? I approached with a friendly smile. I think we met at one of Ivy's company events. Evan Hollis. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: recognition, confusion, and finally a kind of smug confidence. Oh, right. Ivy's husband. He sat up, not bothering to extend his hand. How's the security business treating you? Can't complain, though I hear you've been having some interesting security challenges at your company lately. The smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, just some rumors about information leaks, questionable vendor relationships, that sort of thing. You know how people talk in the tech industry. His workout buddies were listening now, their expressions shifting from admiration to curiosity. Damien clearly didn't like being the subject of speculation rather than the center of attention. I think there might be some confusion, he said, standing up to his full height, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. No confusion at all. I'm actually quite good at keeping track of information. It's what I do for a living. I smiled pleasantly. Speaking of which, how's that new car working out for you? What new car? The one you'll need after someone keys your current one and slashes the tires. His face went red. Are you threatening me? Not at all, just making conversation about the kinds of things that happen to people who make poor choices. I patted him on the shoulder in a friendly manner. Enjoy your workout, Damien. I walked away, leaving him standing there with his mouth open and his audience looking confused. As I reached the exit, I heard him start to explain to his friends that I was clearly unstable, that he was considering calling the police. Perfect. Let him make himself look paranoid and defensive. I drove to the parking lot of Damien's apartment building and waited. Sure enough, when he arrived home an hour later, he found his BMW decorated with soap messages across the windshield. Home wrecker in large, dripping letters. I watched from across the street as he discovered the artistic addition to his vehicle. His face went through the same progression of emotions I'd seen at the gym, but this time there was genuine fear mixed with the anger. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This means war. I typed back, looking forward to it. Thursday morning brought chaos to Ivy's carefully constructed world. I was having coffee in the kitchen when my phone rang. Monica, her voice shaking with barely contained panic. Evan, you need to call off whatever you're doing. Ivy's a mess. Damien's talking about getting lawyers involved, and people at work are starting to ask questions. Good morning to you too, Monica. What exactly am I supposed to be calling off? Don't play dumb. The car, the messages, whatever you told that reporter. I haven't spoken to any reporters, though I understand they've been asking interesting questions about workplace relationships and conflicts of interest. There was silence on the other end. Then, you're going to destroy her career. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just making sure the truth comes to light. After I hung up, I realized Monica's call had revealed something important. She was more worried about the professional consequences than the personal ones. That suggested she had her own skin in the game. I called Casey with new instructions. I want you to dig deeper into Monica's relationship with both Ivy and Damien. Something tells me our little PR specialist is playing multiple angles. Already on it. And Evan? I've got some interesting news about Cross. Seems like his apartment building has excellent security cameras, and they're very cooperative with licensed private investigators. What did you find? Let's just say your wife isn't the only woman who's been visiting his penthouse after hours. Monica's been there too, and their interactions didn't look particularly professional. The pieces were falling into place beautifully. Ivy thought she was playing a simple game of adultery and public humiliation, but she'd actually stumbled into a much more complex web of deception and betrayal. That afternoon, I received a call from my lawyer, Patricia Stone, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in family law and business disputes. Evan, I just got a very interesting call from Damien Cross's attorney. They're claiming harassment and threatening legal action if you don't cease and desist from what they call a campaign of intimidation. What campaign would that be? Apparently someone's been vandalizing his car, sending threatening messages, and spreading rumors about his professional conduct. I leaned back in my chair, genuinely curious. And they think I'm responsible for all of that? Are you? I had one conversation with the man at the gym. I haven't touched his car or sent any threatening messages. As for rumors about his professional conduct, well, the truth isn't really a rumor, is it? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Evan, I need to ask you directly. Are you planning anything that could be construed as harassment or intimidation? I'm planning to protect my interests and expose the truth about what my wife and her boss have been doing. Everything I do will be completely legal and above board. Good, because I have a feeling this is going to get complicated before it gets simple. That evening, I was working in my home office when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I saw Ivy getting out of a taxi, her face set in determined lines. She'd clearly come to confront me directly. She stormed through the front door without knocking, technically still her legal residence, and found me at my desk. "We need to talk," she announced, throwing her purse onto the chair across from me. "I'm listening." "This has gone far enough, Evan. The car, the financial games, whatever you're doing to Damien, it needs to stop." I looked up from my laptop, studying her face. Even angry and disheveled, she was still beautiful, but I could see the cracks in her usual composed facade. "I'm not doing anything to Damien, though I understand he's been having some professional difficulties lately. Don't lie to me. He told me about your conversation at the gym, about the threats you made. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply observed that people who make poor choices sometimes face consequences for those choices." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a hiss. "If you think you can intimidate me or him, you're wrong. We're not afraid of you." "Then why are you here?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She straightened up, searching for an answer that would let her maintain the upper hand. "Because I want this to end civilly. We can get divorced, split our assets, and move on with our lives like adults." "That's a very reasonable proposal. I assume you've already discussed the details with Damien?" Her face flushed. "This isn't about Damien." "Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been planning your exit strategy for months. The separate credit cards, the hotel rooms, the cozy dinners with your boss, that all takes coordination. You've been spying on me." "I've been paying attention to our joint financial accounts and observing your behavior. There's a difference." She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "Fine. Yes, Damien and I have been seeing each other, but that doesn't give you the right to sabotage our careers. I haven't sabotaged anyone's career, though I understand there are some questions being raised about conflicts of interest and professional misconduct. You leaked information to reporters. I haven't spoken to any reporters, but if they're asking questions, maybe that's because someone else has noticed the same patterns I have." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was bluffing. "What do you want, Evan?" "I want exactly what you offered me at the company gala, for you to have more fun without me. I'm just making sure you get the complete experience." "What does that mean?" I closed my laptop and stood up, moving to face her directly. "It means you wanted independence, and I'm giving it to you. Complete independence. No joint accounts, no shared assets, no safety net. Just you, on your own, dealing with the consequences of your choices." Her eyes widened as she began to understand the scope of what I was planning. "You can't just cut me off financially. We're married." "We're separated. You've been staying elsewhere, remember? And since you make more money than I do, as you so helpfully pointed out, supporting yourself shouldn't be a problem. This is about revenge. This is about justice. There's a difference." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then turned back with one final attempt at intimidation. "You have no idea who you're messing with, Evan. Damien has connections, resources, influence. If you keep pushing, you're going to regret it. I'm looking forward to finding out." After she left, I sat back down at my desk and continued working. The next phase of my plan was already in motion, and Ivy's visit had confirmed that she was beginning to understand the gravity of her situation. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey. "Got some interesting financial data on Cross. Want to meet for drinks?" I grabbed my jacket and headed for Rita's bar, where I knew the next chapter of the story would begin to unfold. Rita's Bar and Grill was busier than usual for a Thursday night, filled with the usual mix of neighborhood regulars and office workers unwinding after long days. I found Casey at a corner table, nursing a beer and looking pleased with himself. "You're going to love this," he said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Cross isn't just having an affair with your wife, he's been running a whole operation." I opened the folder and found financial records, email printouts, and surveillance photos. The picture they painted was more complex than I'd imagined. "Monica's not just Ivy's friend," Casey continued. "She's been feeding information to Cross about other employees, other executives, anyone who might be a threat to his position. In return, he's been giving her inside information about company decisions, helping her manipulate PR situations to her advantage. And Ivy. Your wife's the prize, but she's not the only player. Cross has been using his position to create a whole network of personal relationships that benefit his career. The board's been getting anonymous tips about all of it." I studied the surveillance photos. Ivy and Damien at expensive restaurants, Monica entering his apartment building, all three of them together at various locations around the city. "Who's sending the anonymous tips?" Casey smiled grimly. That's the beautiful part. It's not coming from outside the company. Someone on the inside has been documenting everything, building a case. Someone who knows about all of this and has access to internal information. Exactly, and I think I know who it is. He pulled out another set of photos, these showing a different figure, Eli from accounting, the same man who'd made snide comments at the company gala. Eli's been photographing meetings, copying emails, tracking financial irregularities. Looks like he's been building a comprehensive file on Cross's activities. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. Why would Eli care about exposing them? Because Cross threw him under the bus last month. There was some discrepancy in the quarterly reports, and Cross blamed it on Eli's department. Nearly got him fired. The picture was becoming clearer. Ivy thought she was playing a simple game of adultery and social manipulation, but she'd walked into the middle of a much larger corporate power struggle. There's more, Casey said, pulling out his phone. I've got audio recordings of conversations between Monica and Cross. Want to hear how they really feel about your wife? He pressed play, and I heard Monica's voice, tinny but clear through the phone's speaker. Ivy's so naive, she actually thinks you're going to leave your wife for her. She has no idea you're just using her to get information about the other executives. Damien's response was equally revealing. She's useful right now, but she's getting too attached. The husband's becoming a problem too. He's smarter than we thought. What do you want to do about him? Nothing direct. We just need to discredit him professionally, make him look unstable. Once his business reputation is destroyed, he'll be too busy trying to survive to cause us any trouble. Casey stopped the recording and looked at me expectantly. Still think this is just about an affair? I felt that familiar cold satisfaction spreading through my chest, but this time it was mixed with something else, genuine anger at how completely they'd underestimated me. When was this recorded? 2 days ago, right after your conversation with Cross at the gym. I pulled out my own phone and started making notes. I need you to get copies of everything to Detective Sibley and my lawyer. I also want you to reach out to Eli, carefully. If he's been building a case against Cross, we might be able to help each other. What about Ivy? I looked at the photos spread across the table, my wife laughing at expensive restaurants, kissing another man in parking garages, completely unaware that she was being used by the very people she thought she was manipulating. Ivy made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. We finished our drinks and parted ways, Casey heading home while I drove through the quiet suburban streets toward my house. But instead of going inside, I parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, at 11:30, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Ivy got out, followed by Monica, both of them clearly having spent the evening drinking and planning their next moves. I watched as they approached my front door, Ivy fumbling with her keys while Monica stood lookout. They were probably planning to search my office, looking for evidence of what I knew and what I was planning. I waited until they were inside, then called Detective Sibley. It's Evan Hollis. My estranged wife just entered my residence without permission, accompanied by another individual. I'm concerned they might be attempting to access confidential client information in my home office. Are you in the house? No, I'm observing from outside. I have security cameras that will record everything they do. I'll send a unit over. Don't engage with them directly. 20 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up to my house, followed by Detective Sibley in his unmarked car. I met them on the sidewalk and explained the situation. They have legal access to the residence, Sibley said, but if they're attempting to access confidential business information or damage property, that's a different matter. We approached the house together, and I used my key to open the front door. Inside, we found Ivy and Monica in my office, going through my filing cabinets and computer files. Ladies, Sibley announced, I need to see some identification. Both women froze, caught in the act of rifling through my business documents. Ivy's face went white, while Monica looked like she was calculating her options for escape. This is my house, Ivy said, trying to regain her composure. I have every right to be here. You have a right to be in the common areas, I corrected. But this office contains confidential client information that you have no legal right to access. Sibley examined the scattered papers and open file cabinets. Ms. Hollis, can you explain what you were looking for? I needed some financial documents for our divorce proceedings. Financial documents that would be in a filing cabinet labeled Client Security Protocols? Monica stepped forward, clearly trying to take control of the situation. This is obviously a misunderstanding. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back, Sibley interrupted. You have no legal right to be in this residence at all. The next hour was a masterclass in watching people's carefully constructed lies fall apart under official scrutiny. Monica was escorted from the premises with a warning about trespassing. Ivy was allowed to remain but forbidden from accessing my office or business materials. After the police left, Ivy and I stood in the living room, the weight of the evening's events settling between us. "You called the cops on me," she said, her voice hollow with disbelief. "I protected my business and my client's confidential information, just like any responsible professional would do." "This is my home, too." "No, Ivy, this was our home, but you made it very clear at the company gala that you'd rather be somewhere else. I'm just helping you get what you wanted." She sank onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted and defeated. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, almost. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you get to experience the complete independence you've been craving. No safety net, no backup plan, just you and the choices you've made. And Damien? What about him? Are you going to destroy his career too?" I sat down across from her, studying her face in the dim light of the living room. "Ivy, I'm not destroying anyone's career, but actions have consequences, and the truth has a way of coming out whether I'm involved or not." She looked up at me, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "I never meant for it to go this far." "Yes, you did. You just never thought you'd get caught." Friday morning brought the kind of autumn weather that makes Boston suburbs look like magazine covers. Crisp air, colorful leaves, the promise of cozy evenings by the fireplace. It was the perfect backdrop for watching someone's world collapse. I was having coffee on the back deck when my phone rang. Eli from Ivy's company, his voice nervous but determined. "Mr. Hollis, I think we should meet. I have some information you might find interesting." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, away from the suburban gossip network and the corporate surveillance. Eli arrived looking like a man who'd been carrying a heavy secret for too long, dark circles under his eyes, constantly checking over his shoulder. "I've been documenting everything," he said without preamble, sliding a thick envelope across the table. "Cross, your wife, Monica, all of it. The board's been asking questions, and I've been providing answers." I opened the envelope and found a comprehensive file. Emails, financial records, meeting transcripts, even audio recordings of conversations in Cross's office. "Why are you doing this?" "Because Cross tried to destroy my career to cover his own mistakes. He blamed me for financial discrepancies that were actually caused by his unauthorized vendor relationships and personal use of company resources." I flipped through the documents, impressed by the thoroughness of his documentation. "This is enough to bring down his entire operation." "That's the idea, but there's something else you should know." Eli leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Cross isn't just using your wife for information and entertainment. He's been setting her up to take the fall if everything comes out." "What do you mean?" "The financial irregularities, the questionable vendor relationships, the misuse of company resources. He's been routing everything through Ivy's department. If the board launches a formal investigation, all the evidence points to her as the primary culprit." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "She has no idea." "None at all. She thinks she's his partner, but she's actually his scapegoat." I studied Eli's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just thought you should know what you're really dealing with. Your wife isn't just cheating on you. She's being manipulated by someone who's planning to destroy her career and possibly her freedom." After Eli left, I sat in my car for a long time, processing this new information. The game had become more complex than I'd realized, and the stakes were higher than simple adultery and public humiliation. I called my lawyer, Patricia Stone, and arranged an emergency meeting. "Evan, this changes everything," she said after reviewing Eli's documentation. "If Cross has been using Ivy to commit financial fraud, she could be facing criminal charges, even if she was unaware of what she was doing." Ignorance isn't always a defense, especially when it comes to financial crimes. The prosecutors will argue that as a senior executive, she had a responsibility to know what was happening in her department. I leaned back in the leather chair, staring at the city skyline through Patricia's office windows. What are my options? Legally, you could let this play out naturally. Cross's scheme will eventually collapse, Ivy will face the consequences, and you'll be free to rebuild your life. And morally. Patricia studied my face carefully. That's not a legal question, Evan. That's something you have to decide for yourself. I spent the rest of the afternoon driving through the city, thinking about the woman I'd married and the choices that had brought us to this point. Ivy had betrayed me, humiliated me publicly, and tried to destroy my business reputation. But she was also being manipulated by someone who was using her as thoroughly as she thought she was using me. That evening, I found myself back at Rita's Bar and Grill, nursing a whiskey and watching the local news on the television above the bar. The lead story made me sit up straight. Tonight at 11, Channel 7 investigates allegations of financial misconduct at one of Boston's fastest-growing tech companies. Our investigation reveals a web of personal relationships, questionable business decisions, and possible criminal activity that reaches the highest levels of corporate leadership. Rita noticed my reaction. That's your wife's company, isn't it? Yeah. Looks like someone's about to have a very bad weekend. My phone buzzed with frantic texts from Ivy. Are you watching the news? We need to talk now. I finished my whiskey and drove home, where I found Ivy's car in the driveway and every light in the house blazing. She met me at the door, her face streaked with tears and her usual composure completely shattered. They're saying I'm under investigation for embezzlement and fraud, she said, her voice breaking. The board suspended me pending a full audit of my department. I'm sorry to hear that. You're sorry? Evan, they're talking about criminal charges. I could go to prison. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw not the confident, manipulative woman who'd humiliated me at the company gala, but a frightened person who was finally beginning to understand the true cost of her choices. What do you want me to say, Ivy? I want you to help me. You're good at this kind of thing. Security, investigations, finding the truth. You could prove that I didn't know what was happening. And why would I do that? Because despite everything that's happened between us, we were married. We built a life together. That has to count for something. I walked past her into the living room and sat down, gesturing for her to take the chair across from me. Tell me about Damien's vendor relationships. What? The companies that got contracts through your department. Tell me about Damien's connections to them. Her face went pale as she began to understand the implications of my question. How do you know about that? Because I've been paying attention. The question is, did you know what you were signing off on? Damien said they were all legitimate companies. He vouched for their qualifications. Did you do independent verification? He said it wasn't necessary. He had personal knowledge of their capabilities. I pulled out my phone and showed her some of the documents Eli had provided. These companies are shells, Ivy. They exist on paper, but they don't have the resources or expertise to fulfill the contracts you approved. She stared at the documents, her hands shaking. He told me they were startup companies with innovative approaches. He lied to you, just like he lied about everything else. The next few hours were a masterclass in watching someone's entire worldview collapse. I walked Ivy through the evidence, showing her how systematically she'd been manipulated and used. By the time I finished, she was curled up on the couch, sobbing with the kind of desperate grief that comes from realizing you've been completely fooled. What am I going to do? She whispered. I looked at this woman who'd betrayed me, humiliated me, and tried to destroy my reputation. I thought about the revenge I'd been planning, the complete independence I'd wanted to force on her, the justice I'd been seeking. Then I thought about Lucas and Mia, and what they'd think of their father if he let their stepmother go to prison for crimes she didn't understand she was committing. We're going to fight back, I said finally. But we're going to do it my way, with my rules, and you're going to tell me everything. Every conversation, every decision, every moment of doubt you ignored because you trusted someone who was using you. She looked up at me with a mixture of hope and confusion. Why would you help me? Because the person who really deserves to pay for this is still out there, thinking he's won. Saturday morning found us in my home office, surrounded by documents, laptops, and the debris of a marriage that had imploded in spectacular fashion. Ivy sat across from my desk, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her, methodically going through every interaction she'd had with Damien Cross over the past 6 months. He always insisted on private meetings, she said, her voice hoarse from crying and talking. Said it was to avoid office politics, but now I realize he didn't want any witnesses to what he was asking me to approve. I made notes on my legal pad, building a timeline of manipulation and deception. What about Monica? How did she fit into all of this? She was always encouraging me to trust Damien, to follow his lead on business decisions, said he was looking out for my career advancement. Ivy laughed bitterly. I thought she was being a good friend. She was being a good accomplice. My phone rang. Casey, with an update on our investigation. Evan, you're going to want to hear this. I've been tracking Cross's financial records, and I found something interesting. Those shell companies, they're all connected to a single offshore account, and that account has been funneling money back to Cross through a series of investments and consulting fees. How much money? Conservative estimate? About $2 million over the past 18 months. I looked at Ivy, who had gone pale again. He's been stealing from your company for over a year, using your department as the vehicle. But the contracts were legitimate. I mean, work was being done. Substandard work at inflated prices, with the difference going into Cross's pocket. You were signing off on theft, but you didn't know it was theft. Casey continued. There's more. I've got evidence that Cross has been planning his exit strategy for months. He's been moving money offshore, setting up new identities, preparing to disappear if everything came crashing down. And leaving Ivy holding the bag. Exactly. She was never his partner. She was his patsy. After I hung up, I turned to Ivy. We need to move fast. If Cross realizes how much we know, he'll implement his escape plan and disappear, leaving you to face all the criminal charges alone. What do you want me to do? I want you to call him and tell him you're panicking about the investigation and you need to meet somewhere private to coordinate your stories. Her eyes widened. You want me to wear a wire? I want you to get him talking about what really happened. If we can get him to admit his role in the fraud, we can prove your innocence. The next few hours were spent preparing for what would essentially be a sting operation. Patricia Stone provided legal guidance, Detective Sibley helped with the technical aspects of recording conversations, and Casey coordinated surveillance. This is dangerous, Patricia warned. If Cross suspects what you're doing, he could become violent or simply refuse to incriminate himself. What's the alternative? I asked. Let him disappear while Ivy goes to prison for his crimes? You could just walk away. Let the system handle it. I looked at Ivy, who was sitting quietly in the corner, listening to us plan her future. Despite everything she'd done to me, despite the betrayal and humiliation, I couldn't abandon her to face this alone. The system is designed to protect people like Cross and sacrifice people like Ivy. We're going to level the playing field. That afternoon, Ivy made the call. Damien, it's me. I'm freaking out about this investigation. We need to talk, somewhere private. She paused, listening to his response. Your apartment? No, that's too risky. What about the construction site on Harbor Street? It's deserted on weekends. She hung up and looked at me. He wants to meet at 8 tonight. Perfect. That gives us time to set everything up. The construction site was ideal for our purposes, isolated enough for privacy, but with plenty of places for Casey and Detective Sibley to position themselves for surveillance. We arrived early and tested the recording equipment, making sure Ivy was comfortable with the technology. Remember, I told her, your job is to get him talking about the financial arrangements, the shell companies, the offshore accounts. Let him think you're looking for reassurance that you won't be caught. What if he doesn't admit anything? He will. Men like Cross can't resist explaining how clever they've been, especially when they think they're talking to someone they've successfully manipulated. At 8 o'clock, Damien's BMW pulled into the construction site. I watched from my concealed position as he got out and approached Ivy, who was standing near a stack of building materials. Even from a distance, I could see his body language. Confident, slightly condescending, the posture of someone who believed he was in complete control of the situation. The conversation started exactly as I'd expected. Ivy, you need to calm down, Damien said, his voice carrying clearly in the still evening air. The investigation is just a formality. They don't have any real evidence of wrongdoing. But the contracts, the vendor relationships, what if they figure out the connections? They won't, because officially there are no connections. I made sure of that when I set up the shell companies. Bingo, first admission on tape. But what about the money? Some of those contracts were for huge amounts. The money is safely offshore, completely untraceable to either of us. Even if they suspect something, they can't prove it. Second admission. I'm scared, Damien. What if they arrest me? They won't arrest you because you're going to stick to the story we discussed. You approved those contracts based on my professional recommendation. You had no reason to suspect any irregularities. But what about you? What if they come after you? This was the moment of truth. Would Cross admit his plan to abandon Ivy and disappear? Baby, I've been planning for this possibility for months. I have resources they don't know about, connections they can't trace. If things get too hot, I can be out of the country in 12 hours. And me? What happens to me? There was a long pause, and I could see Cross moving closer to Ivy, probably trying to use his physical presence to reassure and manipulate her. You'll be fine. You're smart, you're beautiful, and you have a good lawyer. Even if the worst happens, you're looking at white-collar minimum security, maybe 18 months. I'll wait for you. The lie was so casual, so practiced, that I almost admired his skill at deception. Almost. 18 months in prison? It's not as bad as it sounds, and when you get out, we'll have enough money to start over anywhere in the world. Money from the offshore accounts? Money from our business arrangement. Think of it as delayed compensation for all the risks you took. Third admission, and the most damning one yet. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Cross becoming increasingly specific about his criminal activities as he tried to reassure Ivy. By the time they parted ways, we had enough evidence to prove not only his guilt, but also Ivy's unwitting participation in his scheme. As Cross drove away, I emerged from my hiding spot and approached Ivy, who was standing alone in the gathering darkness. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Like I've been living in a dream for the past year, and I just woke up to find out it was actually a nightmare." "The nightmare's almost over." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with something that might have been respect. "Why are you doing this, Evan? After everything I did to you, why are you helping me?" I thought about the question as we walked back to our cars. Why was I helping the woman who'd betrayed and humiliated me? Why was I risking my own reputation and resources to save someone who'd tried to destroy me? "Because the alternative is letting him win," I said finally. "And I don't like losing to people who think they're smarter than everyone else." It wasn't the complete truth, but it was all the truth I was ready to acknowledge, even to myself. As Sunday morning brought news that changed everything, I was reviewing the recordings from the previous night when Detective Sibley called with an urgent update. "Evan, we've got a problem. Cross filed a restraining order against you yesterday, claiming harassment and threatening behavior. A judge signed off on it based on his testimony about the gym confrontation and the vandalism to his car." "I never vandalized his car." "I know that, and you know that, but he's got photos of the damage and a timeline that puts you in the area when it happened. His lawyer is also claiming you've been orchestrating a campaign of intimidation." I felt a familiar chill of recognition. Cross was implementing a more sophisticated version of the same strategy Ivy had tried to use against me, discrediting my reputation to neutralize the threat I represented. What does the restraining order mean practically? It means you can't be within 500 feet of him, his residence, or his workplace. If you violate it, you'll be arrested. And our evidence? Still admissible, but his lawyer will argue it was obtained through harassment and intimidation. It complicates things. After I hung up, I realized Cross had made a critical miscalculation. He was trying to neutralize me personally, but he'd forgotten about all the other players in this game. I called Casey first. "I need you to deliver our evidence package to Eli at the company. Make sure he understands that Cross is planning to flee the country." "What about the restraining order?" "Doesn't apply to you, and it definitely doesn't apply to the company's internal investigation." Next, I called Patricia Stone. "I need you to contact the district attorney's office immediately. We have evidence of ongoing financial crimes and flight risk." "Evan, the restraining order complicates our ability to present this evidence. Cross's lawyer will claim it's the product of a personal vendetta." "Then we don't present it ourselves. We make sure it gets to the right people through other channels." The final call was to Ivy. "Where are you right now?" "At Monica's apartment." "Why?" "Because Cross is making his move, and you need to be somewhere safe when everything comes crashing down." "What do you mean?" "I mean, your boyfriend just filed a restraining order against me, which means he's preparing to implement his exit strategy. He's going to disappear, probably within the next 24 hours, and he's going to make sure all the evidence points to you as the mastermind behind the fraud." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Monica's been acting strange all morning. Nervous, making phone calls in the other room." "Get out of there now. Monica's been working with Cross from the beginning. If he's preparing to run, he's probably tying up loose ends." "What kind of loose ends?" "The kind that can't testify against him." I heard Ivy moving around, probably gathering her things. "Where should I go?" "Come home, whatever else has happened between us. You're safer here than anywhere else." While I waited for Ivy to arrive, I made one more call, to Mrs. Pendergast, my elderly neighbor who never missed anything that happened on our street. "Mrs. P., it's Evan. I need a favor. If you see any unfamiliar cars on the street tonight, or anyone approaching my house, I want you to call the police immediately." "Is everything all right, dear?" "Just some complications with Ivy's work situation. Nothing you need to worry about, but I want to be cautious." "I'll keep an eye out. And Evan, I've been watching that wife of yours come and go at all hours with different people. If you ask me, she's been making some poor choices." "She's beginning to understand that, Mrs. P." Ivy arrived an hour later, looking exhausted and frightened. She'd clearly been crying again, and her usual perfect appearance was replaced by the disheveled look of someone whose world was collapsing. "Monica tried to convince me to stay," she said as I led her into the house. "Said you were just trying to manipulate me, that I couldn't trust you." "What did you tell her?" "That I was tired of being manipulated by people I trusted." She sat down heavily on the living room couch. "I think she was recording our conversation." "Probably. Cross needs evidence that you're unstable and unreliable, in case you try to testify against him. We spent the rest of the day preparing for what I expected would be the final confrontation. I reviewed all our evidence, made sure copies were safely stored in multiple locations, and briefed Ivy on what to expect when the authorities finally moved against Cross. "What happens to me?" she asked as evening approached. "If we're successful, you'll probably face some charges related to negligent oversight, but nothing like what Cross is facing. You'll lose your job, pay some fines, maybe do community service." "And us?" I looked at this woman who'd been my wife, who'd betrayed me and humiliated me, but who'd also been victimized by someone far more calculating and ruthless than either of us had initially realized. "I don't know, Ivy. We'll have to see what's left when all of this is over." At 9 o'clock, my phone rang with a call from Detective Sibley. "Evan, we just executed a search warrant on Cross's apartment and office. He's gone, cleared out completely, probably left sometime this afternoon." "What about the evidence?" "We found enough to confirm everything in your recordings. Shell companies, offshore accounts, falsified documents, it's all there. But the man himself has vanished." I felt a surge of frustration. After everything we'd been through, Cross was going to escape while Ivy faced the consequences of his crimes. "There's more," Sibley continued. "We also arrested Monica Chen on charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Seems like she's been helping Cross cover his tracks for months." "What about flight risk? Is he still in the country?" "We're checking airports and border crossings, but honestly, if he's been planning this for months, he probably had multiple exit strategies." After I hung up, I found Ivy staring out the living room window at the quiet suburban street where we'd once planned to build a life together. "He's gone, isn't he?" she said without turning around. "It looks that way." "So he wins. He gets away with everything, and I'm left to face the consequences." I joined her at the window, looking out at the familiar neighborhood that suddenly felt like foreign territory. "Maybe, or maybe this is just the beginning of a different kind of justice." "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a text message I'd received an hour earlier. "Cross's plane landed in Grand Cayman 2 hours ago. Thought you should know. Eli's been tracking him. Casey's been monitoring his financial transactions, and Patricia's been coordinating with international law enforcement. Cross thinks he's escaped, but he's actually walked into a much larger trap." For the first time in days, Ivy smiled. A real smile, not the practiced expression she used for social situations. "You planned this." "I planned for multiple contingencies. Cross was always going to run when things got complicated. The question was whether we'd be ready when he did." My phone buzzed with another message, this one from Casey. "Cayman authorities have frozen his accounts. He's stranded with whatever cash he carried." I showed the message to Ivy, who laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time since this whole nightmare began. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait and see how long it takes him to realize he's not as smart as he thought he was." Outside, Mrs. Pendergast's porch light came on, and I saw her peering through her curtains at something down the street. My phone rang immediately. "Evan, dear, there's a strange car parked at the end of the block. 2 men inside, and they've been watching your house for the past hour." I looked out and saw the vehicle she was describing, a dark sedan with tinted windows positioned to have a clear view of my front door. "Call the police, Mrs. P. Tell them you're reporting suspicious activity in the neighborhood." I turned to Ivy, who had gone pale again. Cross left more than just Monica behind to tie up loose ends. The final act of our drama was about to begin. The police arrived within minutes of Mrs. Pendergast's call, their presence immediately changing the dynamic on our quiet suburban street. I watched from the living room window as 2 officers approached the suspicious vehicle, their flashlights cutting through the evening darkness. The sedan drove away before the officers could make contact, but not before I got a clear look at the license plate. I called Detective Sibley immediately. "The car's registered to a private security company," he told me after running the plates, "the kind that specializes in corporate problem-solving and asset recovery." Cross hired professionals to clean up his mess. That's what it looks like. We're going to station a patrol car on your street tonight, just in case." I hung up and turned to Ivy, who was sitting on the couch with her knees drawn up to her chest, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. "This is my fault," she said quietly. "All of it. If I hadn't been so stupid, so greedy for attention and validation. Cross is a professional manipulator. He's probably destroyed dozens of careers and lives over the years. You're not responsible for his crimes. But I'm responsible for mine, for betraying you, for humiliating you in front of everyone, for believing I was smarter than I actually am." I sat down across from her, studying her face in the lamplight. The confident, ambitious woman who'd mocked me at the company gala was gone, replaced by someone who was finally beginning to understand the true cost of her choices. What do you want, Ivy? When all of this is over, what do you actually want? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. I want to not be the kind of person who could be fooled so completely. I want to not be the kind of person who would betray someone who loved her just to feel important. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I want to be someone worth forgiving. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Casey, calling with an update from the Cayman Islands. Cross tried to access one of his offshore accounts this afternoon. When he discovered they were frozen, he made some very angry phone calls to his contacts in Boston. The local authorities recorded everything. What kind of phone calls? The kind where he admits to financial fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. He also made some specific threats against you and Ivy, which the FBI is very interested in hearing about. I felt that familiar cold satisfaction spreading through my chest. Cross's arrogance was finally working against him. There's more, Casey continued. Monica's been cooperating with the investigation. Seems like she's not as loyal to Cross as he thought. She's provided detailed testimony about the entire operation, including his plans to frame Ivy for everything. What about the men who were watching the house? They work for a company that Cross hired to intimidate potential witnesses, but now that we have recordings of him making threats, their presence becomes evidence of witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. After I hung up, I shared the news with Ivy, who listened with a mixture of relief and amazement. It's really over? She asked. The criminal part is over. Cross will be extradited to face charges, Monica's already in custody, and you'll probably get immunity in exchange for your testimony. And the personal part? That was the question I'd been avoiding all week. What happened to a marriage after one spouse betrayed the other, but then they worked together to survive a much larger betrayal? I don't know, I admitted. We'll have to figure that out. The next morning brought a parade of law enforcement officials, lawyers, and reporters to our quiet suburban street. Cross's arrest in the Cayman Islands was front-page news, and Ivy's role as a cooperating witness made her a key figure in the story. I watched from the kitchen window as she gave a statement to the FBI agents on our front porch, her voice steady and clear as she described Cross's manipulation and her own unwitting participation in his crimes. She's handling this well, Detective Sibley observed, joining me at the window. A lot of people would have fallen apart completely. She's stronger than she gives herself credit for. You both are. Most marriages wouldn't survive what you've been through. I looked at him curiously. Who says ours has survived? The fact that you're still here, still protecting her, still working together to make sure justice gets done. That's not the behavior of a man who's given up on his wife. After the officials left, Ivy and I found ourselves alone in the house for the first time in weeks. The silence felt strange after all the chaos and drama of the past few days. What happens now? She asked, echoing the question that had become our constant refrain. Now we figure out how to rebuild our lives, separately or together, depending on what we both decide we want. What do you want, Evan? I thought about the question as I looked around the living room we'd decorated together, filled with the remnants of the life we'd tried to build. I want to be able to trust you again. I want to believe that the person I fell in love with is still there somewhere, underneath all the ambition and insecurity and need for validation. And if she is? Then maybe we can figure out how to start over. Ivy stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, where our wedding photo sat next to pictures of Lucas and Mia. I need to tell you something, she said, her back still turned to me. The night of the company gala, when I said those things about you following me and having more fun alone, I didn't mean them. I was showing off for Monica and the others, trying to seem sophisticated and independent. I know. But the affair with Cross, the betrayal, the lies, those were real. I made those choices because I was flattered by his attention and excited by the danger of it all. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. I threw away everything we had together for someone who was using me as a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. How do you forgive someone for being that stupid? I stood up and walked over to her, stopping just close enough to see the genuine remorse and pain in her eyes. You don't forgive someone for being stupid, Ivy. You forgive them for being human. And do you? Forgive me? I reached out and touched her face, wiping away her tears with my thumb. I'm working on it. Outside, Mrs. Pendergast's dog started barking at something, and we both turned to look out the window. A news van was pulling up to the curb, followed by another car full of reporters. The circus is starting again, Ivy said with a weak smile. Then let's give them a good show. I took her hand and led her to the front door. Whatever happened next, Whether we rebuilt our marriage or went our separate ways, we would face it together, as partners instead of adversaries. The reporters surged forward as we stepped onto the porch, their cameras flashing and voices calling out questions about Cross, the investigation, and our marriage. But for the first time in months, I wasn't worried about what they might write or what people might think. Ivy squeezed my hand and stepped forward to address the crowd. My husband and I have been through a difficult time, but we've learned that sometimes the worst experiences can teach you the most important lessons about what really matters. She paused, looking directly into the cameras. We've learned that trust is more valuable than ambition, that loyalty is more important than excitement, and that the people who truly love you are the ones who stand by you when everything falls apart. The reporters shouted more questions, but Ivy had said everything that needed to be said. We went back inside and closed the door on the chaos outside, ready to begin the hard work of figuring out what came next. The spectacle was finally over. The real work was just beginning.